This is our first time we've done it. We planned one of these meetings last year for Hawaii, but that got canceled. So we're doing it again this year. Hopefully virtually will help. I hope that there's some people beyond just the panelists that are in our session. I can see there's a few people, but so everybody welcome. So the way this is going to be set up, we have editors from several journals. I'm going to give one editor from each journal 10 minutes to give kind of a description of their journal, just what they think is important about the journal, maybe how to submit, that kind of thing. Then once we're done with those presentations, then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. And I guess I will be supervising that. But the order is going to be, we're going to start off with the Annals. Since the Annals of Regional Science is the quote official journal of the WRSA, we're going to start off, and I'll have Brian Kim, one of our editors, do the presentation, followed by Journal of Regional Science, then International Regional Science Review, Regional Science Policy and Practice, Papers in Regional Science, and then International Journal of Urban Sciences. So that's the order. Now I will, keep you to your time and call up the next editor. So anybody have any questions? So people in the audience, hold your questions. You can type them into the chat, and then I can look at them at the end. But maybe at the end, we'll also let the audience open up their video and unmute and then ask questions directly. Okay, so sort of rules are, let the person presenting have their say, and go on to the next one, then we'll have Q&A after that. Okay, everybody have that? Okay, so let's see, let's start off with Brian. Is Brian even here? Yeah, there's Brian. Brian, I know it's very early in the morning for you.
Yes, let me just start.
Okay.
Can everyone see the slide that I just shared?
Yes, I can see it. Thank
Okay.
you. I can see it.
Okay. It's very early in the morning in Korea, 6:30 in the morning, but we had a board meeting just before this session. So I was walking, I woke up since 4:30 in the morning. I'm fine with that, as long as I'm joining this session to help our scholars and the students who would like to submit the research papers to our journal. Since we are the official journal of Western Regional Science Association, I guess we have the honor to start in the beginning. Okay. So our journal is published by Springer. Let me just briefly give some introduction about our journal. We are mostly exploring the research papers in the disciplinary field of regional and urban studies, and most of these papers make some of these contributions to the body of knowledge in the spatial dimension, which plays a fundamental role, which includes regional economics, resource management, location theory, urban and regional planning, transportation and communication, population distribution, and environmental quality. At the same time, we also are looking in the field of the agriculture as well. So the unique about our journal is that we do have 3 editors-in-chief. Janet, who's representing the American side, okay, and Martin Anderson, he is representing the European section, and me, which I'm representing most of the Asian sections. We do have 2 advisory board, Woo-Jun Kim and Chang-Ho John Kim. They were former editors of our Annals and Regional Science. And we also do have 35 associate editors who are very active, who also doing great amount of contribution to our journal. So we publish about 6 issues each year, from February to December. And there's about 60 articles. Last year we published about 59 articles. Okay, and we published 10 articles in not each issue. okay, and total about 250 pages per issue. So our impact factor has been grown for last few years. For most recent impact factor measure, which is 2019, we have about 1.75, which is up from 1.075 in 2018. And on our 5-year impact factor is 1.78. And our journal ranks Q2 for economic journals, Q3 for geography, and Q4 for regional and urban planning and environmental studies journals. And last year we had about 124, little over, about 125,000 downloads for our papers. So we have about 401 articles which are submitted in last year, which is up from 359 in 2019. Our acceptance rate was about 18%, which are down about 2% from 2019, but up from 11%, which is in 2018. The number of days for first decision is about 99 days, about 3 months, which is last year. This was down from 123 days in 2019, but up from 86 in 2018. And also due to the COVID-19 last year, there was a quite delay of this reviewing process, okay, from the reviewers. So it takes a little more time than we anticipated. Yeah, so that's basically my introduction. Janet told us the 10 minutes, but there was about time of 5 to 10 minutes. So yeah. I prepared a very brief introduction. So I just want to go Q&A session for any questions that are raised for our journal. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's probably better to wait till the end, but I guess if we only take 5 minutes, we probably could have a quick question. Okay, now can you unshare your screen?
Sure, okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see, so the second journal to be presented is Journal of Regional Science, and Alessandra Fagian from Gran Sasso Science Institute, Italy, will make the discussion or lead the discussion.
Thank you. Can I share my screen?
Yes, I think you have permission. Do you see a share screen?
Yeah. I can see it.
And I can see it.
Right. Okay, so let me start. What is really nice is that you have your iPhone with the time next to you when you're presenting online. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me to present the Journal of Regional Science. Actually, I'll try to be quick. This is a presentation that I've done a few times because before I was a journal editor for the Papers in Regional Science for 6 years. So over the years, I kind of adjusted a little bit the presentation. I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about general principle suggestion that I might want to give to younger people trying to publish in journals in general, especially in journal in regional science. Okay, so I'll start with the obvious, which is when you actually write a paper, you have to write it well. What do I mean by write it well? I mean, you have to write a very good introduction. Sometimes this is actually underestimated. And what I mean by a good introduction, as an editor, I always kind of look at the introduction to understand what are the novelties of the paper. So what motivates the paper? Why should I care about what you are writing? And you have, in a certain sense, to sell your paper. Emphasize the good points. Be careful in reporting the empirical results. Overstating or stretching your results is not going to help you. And write good conclusions, because this ties the paper results back to the introduction. And by doing so, it emphasizes also your contribution. For strategic reasons, I'm also telling you that you give some thought and some more thought to whom you cite and the journals that are cited, because this is also affecting sometimes the editor's choice of referee. And also titles are also often underestimated, but this is your kind of shop window, right? It's the first thing that we're actually looking at when we are looking at a paper. So titles also are very important. When you have a good advanced manuscript, I would say if you have, colleagues that you are in contact with, send your manuscript to colleagues for comments. Not many colleagues have time, but maybe someone is very interested in the topic, you are collaborating with them, so send it to them. And especially presenting at conferences or seminars. This is the reason why we have conferences and seminars. Revise based on the comments and then submit. Because if you actually don't do that, you don't present the paper and you send a very weak paper, or you have a very weak presentation, these over time will actually weaken and give you a bad reputation. Okay, so now submitting the paper. I call them some commandments. They're not 10 though. Okay, the first thing is check the interest or the special focus of the journal. Okay, so how do you know that? Well, the biggest cues are the recent papers that are published by the journal. And then also think about, do you want to send it to a general interest paper, mainstream economics, or do you want to send it to a field journal, such as one of the journals in regional science? I would also suggest, that's what I did at least, to have a submission tree plan. So when I was younger, I tried, of course, with the highest ranked journal first, and then, you kind of go down if you get rejected from the highest ranked journal. The good news is that the highest ranked journal are normally very quick in giving you a desk rejection if they're not interested in your paper. And then you go down. But also think about an optimal rate of rejection. I have to say, I wasn't good at that because I was so worried when I was young of being rejected that my rejection rate was very low, but at the same time, I never published in very, very high ranked journal because I would rather not be rejected and kind of settle for something which was a little bit less. But my advisor did tell me that my rejection rate was not correct, and there is an optimal rejection rate. If you don't get rejected, it means that you're not really setting yourself up at the right standard. So think about that as well. And then differentiate your portfolio. So there is a trade-off, as usual for everything, between risk and return. So publishing in higher impact journal bring the highest career returns, but the risk is higher too, especially in the US. When you go for tenure, you don't want to get there with 0 articles, right? And so when you get rejected and someone else is publishing your idea, that's a risk too, right? So if you go too high, the idea that you have might get stolen, and that's not very good either. And then have different articles in the pipeline. So what I used to do when I was younger was thinking about also different kind of, I don't want to say quality because all journals are actually good as long as they're refereed, but I was trying and set my articles in different journals so that I had a pipeline. Some journals take longer, some journals are a little bit quicker. So think about really differentiate, not all your eggs in one basket, they say in English, right? So try and really differentiate your portfolio. Common reasons for rejection. Okay, I shouldn't give you this list because this is how I actually get my easy desk rejection. A topic that is not interesting, okay, something that is not really new and has been done for the last 20 years is a lot more difficult to publish, right? Or something that is unsuitable or inappropriate for the journal. Something that we never published in the past, either is very novel or it's not something that we're interested in. So make sure to understand which is which. Poor writing. So even if the substance of the paper is very good, if I can't understand what you are writing in the introduction, it's very, very likely that you get it as rejection. And then, of course, if there are obvious mistakes in the theory, in the empirical methodology, this is also a rejection reason, or excessive length. So very, very long articles that seem to come from a doctoral thesis that is just being cut out in pieces, but there's still 50 pages. It's far too long. We don't have actually in Journal of Regional Science a word limit, but in our head as editors we do. So if they are too long, they get boring, and that's an obvious reason for desk rejection. And try to avoid some obvious red flags. So for instance, you omit some obvious citation in a field And then you kind of say the same thing. This paper goes to that person that you don't cite and that did a lot of work on that. Even if you pass the desk rejection stage, very likely this person is going to reject you because you didn't even mention his or her work. Okay, so do's and don'ts. There are a lot of them, but just the most obvious one. Do not send a letter to the editor complaining that the referee or the co-editor are incompetent or worse. Don't send a lot of papers to an editor who seems to like your work. So you send an article, it goes through, and within 6 months, a year, you send another one. Even if it's your friends, there will be a certain amount of articles that I can actually accommodate in the journal, even if they're good. And try to publish essentially the same material more than once, because it will really hurt your reputation. Even worse, submit the same article to 2 journals, especially if they're regional science. You think I'm kidding, but actually, within a month I became an editor of Papers in Regional Science. I discovered 2 articles by the same person that were simultaneously submitted to Journal of Regional Science and Papers in Regional Science. And the guy got 4 test rejection letters in 1 day. So. Okay, so it's okay to send a polite query if your paper has been there for a while, say at least 6 months without a response. But make sure that you're not delinquent in your own reviewing, especially for the same journal. So you don't do the referee report, but then you're asking about your paper. And this is very important, and I'm sure that all the other editors will know that if an editor asks you to review a paper and it's in your field, say yes, because as you want the review process to go smoothly for your papers, right? Other people want the same. So if you review promptly and carefully, that will also help you to get a good reputation in the field. And try to be constructive in your report. I'm not just saying that you don't have to criticize, but I don't particularly like referee reports where they're completely destructive without offering some kind of ways forward to the people. Even if the people get rejected, it's always very good to have some kind of suggestion that you can work on. Some other things, well, you want to consider whether you want to do a solo author versus a co-author paper, many small papers versus fewer big papers, somewhere in the middle. You don't want to do the salami cutting kind of thing, but also, you know, big paper maybe become too long, top journal versus lower rank. Well, this is all part of the kind of differentiated portfolio theory. Okay. Last but not least, I was very bad in advertising Journal of Regional Science. This is Journal of Regional Science. We are 4 editors, like in Annals of Regional Science. We are from different parts of the world. Steve and myself are in Europe. Ed Colson is in North America. Yasusada Murata is in Japan. Our impact factor has been around or above 2 for a while now. One thing I want to say to you, and it's the last thing and then I'm done, it's that because of COVID, we had an increase in the submissions. So more people are actually home and writing. And this is a common trend to almost all the journals I've thought of. So unfortunately, the acceptance rate is going down because we have a set number of articles that we're publishing. I don't know if 2021 will be the same or at some point the trend will invert, but so to say that you don't have to get discouraged if you get more rejection this year, because I think it's a natural phenomenon that is happening because of COVID. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm just reopening everything and stop sharing my screen if I can do that. Okay.
Thank you, Alejandra. That was very informative. I think everybody can take heed of your suggestions there. And it is interesting that your journal, same as ours, got more submissions in this past year. So we'll see if that continues. Same question you have, does it continue or not? But anyway, we'll open up for questions again at the end. Thanks very much. Let's go on to the next journal, International Regional Science Review. And Alan Murray of the University of California at Santa Barbara will tell us about that journal.
Sorry, I gave a great
introduction. Okay, there you go. Now you're unmuted. Great.
Yeah, I was muted, so you guys all missed it. Sorry. I'm not going to repeat it. anyway, I prepared a few slides like others, and so I'll just talk briefly. And since Alessandra did a great job of talking about do's and don'ts, I'll try not to repeat any of that stuff. But International Regional Science Review is published by SAGE. We publish 6 issues per year. We're now volume 44. I co-edit the journal with Tony Grubasek, who's actually, this is wrong, not ASU, but University of Texas. And you can see our little blurb about we publish a forum for economists, geographers, planners, social scientists, blah, blah, blah. So you can see that. And I think like all journals, I mean, if we're really talking to students and those interested in learning more of the insights of publishing, we have an editorial board. It consists of a lot of distinguished people, and we publish things that these people are experts in. And so if there's any advice to young people just starting out, it's that you should appreciate and understand a little bit of the nature of the journal through its representation, both editors and editorial boards. It's pretty important because, like other journals, we rely in many cases with most publications on at least some of our editorial board members for their opinion and insight. A little bit of history, maybe just to be different than everybody else. If you're interested in knowing some of the editor history of the journal, it started back with Walter Isard. The ball was carried by Andy Isserman for many, many, many years, and then eventually brought on board Luke Anselin, and then it was Luke and Serge for a number of years. And then when we all went to Arizona State in those dates aren't, yeah, in 2008, then the 3 of us co-edited, and then finally in 2015, Tony and I became the editors. And so far, I think we haven't ruined the journal, so that's good. In terms of understanding a little bit our submissions, I didn't include the historical ones. Seeing Alessandra's, I probably should have, but in 2020, we had 178 submissions. Depending on how you slice it and dice it, and this has been true over a recent history, it's about 10 to 14% acceptance rate. In terms of our journal, we usually on average are getting back to people with a first-time decision within a month, which is pretty good. It's not 6 months like Alessandra said, don't ask a question, no. And then in 2020, if you wanted to know, about 70 of those, or in addition to the 178, we have 70 or so that are new, or not new submissions, but rather revisions. And we have a couple of submissions that are special issues in progress. And you can see, I think this is from the year before last, but where these submissions are coming from and in the journal. Some advice, and I just added this, and as I said, I'm not going to repeat the good stuff from Alessandra. I guess I would add maybe some things that she didn't say, is that it's important that you have something to say, right? That's a big thing. And then secondly, that you're contributing in some way to the advancement of our knowledge. And that's really what the publication is all about, right? This ongoing dialogue. In terms of International Regional Science Review, historically, there have been a lot of review-oriented papers in the journal, and that's something that we encourage, though I would like to see more. We have them, but not as regularly as I would like. We see a lot of work that's on theoretical and methodological advances in various ways. We do publish quite a few things that focus on regional type studies that speak to, in particular, significant insights in policy and planning dynamics, so that like other journals, if you apply this well-used and worn method to look at something and don't find something interesting, then you're going to be really challenged in that ever getting published. That's not the sort of things we would publish. And then I guess also we've regularly done special issues on a range of topics. And so those can be important to be involved in or to think about and organize yourself. So with that, I'll keep under my minutes and we'll proceed to the next one. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alan. That was short but sweet, right? Okay. Going to the next journal, it's Regional Science Policy and Practice, and we have two representatives, Tomás Dentino from University of the Azores, Portugal, and Neil Reed from University of Toledo. But Tomás is going to make the presentation, then Neil will jump in the Q&A. Okay, the floor is yours. Tomás, you have to unmute.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for the participating here. Well, Regional Science Policy and Practice that we are editing 3 years ago. So it's the main aim is to publish studies about human interaction within space, and this somehow limits some papers that have human interaction but without space, and that have space without human interaction, or who don't have replicable methods. So we are owned by this editorial board, and now we enlarge it. So it's a large editorial board, people that can advise us, can help us in reviewing, and also publish once in a while in our journal that is trying to have an impact factor by this year or by 2022. That will depend on the decision of the editorial team and decision of the editorial board, and also, of course, on the evaluators. So we have a large editorial team, well, very broad across all continents, and now we are enlarging, asking Regional Science Association International Council to enlarge to India and China with 2 or more or 4 more members in order to accommodate and have papers from these big countries that usually speak or write good English and have very interesting subjects to deal. So we changed a little bit the way we published, because we try to arrange special issues all over the year. Of course, now it's difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to accommodate them, but anyway, it has been useful, and somehow the citations and also the collection of papers and the reviewing of papers managed to, it works well, or at least that was the strategy, and is working well. This is the increase in number of citations by the citation Google Score Index and also by the Scopus score. So we are expecting that the next year we'll have 1,000, and eventually this will continue further on, and so it shows that eventually the strategy needs to some guidance, but at least it's proving well. Also, the number of download trends, although there was a decrease until 2018 because there were not so much papers published before. Now it has increased steadily, and we hope it will continue. This is indicators that are come late, so we didn't receive yet 2020 records on this. But anyway, I think after this first, because we are increasing fast in terms of publications and in terms of the citations, so there is a time lag in these indicators that somehow can appear next year. We have this award, but now this is new, so just award today. It is, and it has been interesting to have this judgment by the jury, because it is clear that the quality of the papers have increased, and also the number of citations of these scholars that somehow have more. If they want to publish a paper within a few, well, in less than 1 year, and if it is good, it goes through, then it can appear, it can be published, well, faster eventually than other journals. So this is the plan for 2021. So it is organized by different issues. The problem, as I told you, is that when we have an issue, announced issue that has not many papers, then we have to combine them. So there is the strategy of the first issue that is compiled, it is published, and of course that requires some management to talking with the guest editors or with the editors in order to combine the different issues. If they are not so big, then they become a topic within an issue. And this will be for 2022, which is interesting. This is that we open a new special issue for India this year on the urban future in Global South, and with Abdul Shaban. And 28 abstracts appear. The problem is that somehow the type of papers that came from different parts of the world are different, and so, eventually we need some guidance, some pedagogy, some interaction with the reviewers in order to have in the final and in the end a good what we think it is a good paper for regional science policy and practice. So we have some theoretical papers that appear, they are well revised, they are published, but eventually they are not well cited because this is not the journal for this type of papers. We have many now from India, and from Russia, papers that are very much descriptive. Somehow they analyze, it is interesting because it is a new world, a different type of world that now appears, but it lacks the theory, it lacks the method, the data. It's more descriptive. Sometimes it's well written and it is interesting, it's published, or if it is some guest editor that we do, but it is cited anyway. But that's not the type of papers that we would like to have. We have also applied papers. That's the problem, which are very good. That's the problem of regional science. But sometimes they lack the theory and they lack the context. So the context is very much local. So it is Americans talking about American, Indians talking about India, and so on. And so we want to somehow enlarge that and to have a good paper. It will be, we have a good context in terms of the problem, the societal problem that exists, and then the literature, and then the theory, and then the good question. And so to have all the passes into that sometimes is different, not in these journals that we are talking here, but in other journals that somehow they just tackle parts of these different topics. And I think we could aim to have more integration between theory, practice, and methods, and that's the role, I think, of this job. So thank you very much. So now we apply, I told you, we'll apply for impact factor this year or next year. We have a lot of issues to be published. We want to push widely because this type of strategy requires eventually more numbers than just 6 numbers that we have, because some numbers eventually don't have a lot of journals, but they have an issue that is interesting to tackle. And we will be present in ERSA, in ARSC, in REVEWERS, in PRESCO. And the idea is to listen, to learn from, not only from this interaction with authors and the editors and the board, but also to know what is the impact, what is the citations that we get, what are the people that in fact are interested in this type of papers. And sometimes it is what we think before it was a good paper. The papers more cited are eventually a little bit different than we thought. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Tomas. It's very interesting for you're describing a new journal and the path that it's going on. So I think it's very interesting for all of us to hear about that. Thank you. So the next presentation is Papers in Regional Science, and Michael Lahr will speak about that.
I'm going to start off just giving some background on the journal. I'll try to share the screen, but I'm going to use, since I was a very different sort of talk and less on advertising for the journal, but I'll do a little of that just because when I can. So let me get there and share some of my screen. So this is I hope you can all see it at this point.
I can see it.
Okay, good. I just joined the editorial team for this year. I'm hoping to depart at the end of the year, but I'm happen to be here at Western Regional Science meetings, and I've been an editor for some time. But Roberta Capella, who is the editor-in-chief, asked me to join, and so you can see here, as opposed to others, we have something like 6 editors, and then we have the usual slew of editorial board, and you'll see my name's down here too, because I guess they want to keep me on the board after I retire from being editor, and they didn't delete me. I don't know. And if anybody sees their name and affiliation inappropriately marked there, for example, I noticed John Carruthers is no longer at George Washington University, he's at Cornell. Please make sure you inform Roberta, not me. Without further ado, I just want to mention one other thing, which is everybody else has mentioned it, their impact factors, and this is the 2-year, which is the conventional one, and you can see that Papers in Regional Sciences has been moving up over time considerably. Most journals have. There's a general upward trend as more and more people cite journals and so forth. And you can see that the 3-year is somewhat more subdued as is the 4-year. But the idea is, it depends on the nature of your article. For example, Tony Smith would have, who Janet and I both know, would be amazed if he even had a 5-year impact factor. His stuff, it goes out for 25 years. And the half-life of certain articles we expect to be longer. If you're in nature climate change, you might be 1 year. And so that's why they have a 14 impact factor. So regional science journals tend to be in the 1 to 2 to 3 range in general. And actually, I'm surprised at how little variation there is across them. The benefit of, I'm going to sell the papers in this case, of the papers is that it is the journal that everyone gets in the association. Everyone from the WRSA, the SRSA, everybody in the United States, all the subgroups get the papers, so everybody has access to it. In that vein, it's a better place to be published. On the other hand, we see that they all cover the same subject matter, and if you fail to get in one, any of the others is a great substitute. It used to be the Journal of Regional Science amongst these had the highest impact factor. It seems to have stabilized at the same level of all the other regional science journals at this point. I don't know where Journal of Urban Economics is, although they seem not to be part of our association anymore. So there's other journals. REVEWERS is another one. There are a bunch of other journals around that are available. So, and Growth and Change is another what's in the family that would be worthwhile publishing in as well. Where to publish is always a quandary, and look at your references in general to determine where you should be publishing. If you have a lot of key publications in Growth and Change, publish in Growth and Change. You're more likely to get in there. So let me get into get into out of this particular thing. Now, how do I get out here? How do I release myself? Oh, here we go. I got it. So I'll get into my presentation here, and we'll have to switch across things here a little bit. So you'll see that I have and some of my own students will see we have here reviewer number 2, the one you're always scared of when you get to journals. Basically, what I want to do is talk about the editor responsibility. Our thing is to maintain journal integrity, to help the authors in general, to make sure that our editorial style across our issues is the same, as well as across the articles. And then we assign papers to reviewers generally with appropriate interest and expertise. I try to cross-fertilize mine. I try to get them in regional science from geography and economics, as well as planning if I can, or as people with methodological tilt, as well as a theoretical tilt. In other words, I might get somebody who knows spatial econometrics if it happens to be a sociological article, just because I want to make sure the econometrics are right, that sort of thing. I want to make sure we assure confidentiality of reviewers as well as the authors. assuming the journal is of that nature. We try to make sure there's enough review for the reviewers, although we don't want it too long for the author's case. I noticed the papers is at rather extraordinarily long, something like 60 days we give people to review, which I think is not good. I kind of like the way that Alan's cuts his off at like a short period. I'm all for that. In other journals I run, I try to make it shorter. I used to run the Review of Regional Studies. Same thing when I was assistant editor at the Journal of Regional Science. I tried to make sure people got them in sooner rather than later. We don't want to overtax any reviewer. And so if we do, you should let us know. We understand if we overtaxed you, and we don't want to do that, except for our associate editors who we want to pound into the dirt. That's what we do. We like to use you guys for 6 to 8 reviews a year, at least in my journals. So I do that. And we encourage you to authors to document responses to all your reviewer comments. We'll get into that later a little bit further. In general, we are supposed to give a clear statement of journal scope, treat all you authors the same, protect your confidentiality, offer an effective rapid peer review. That's our job, is to make sure we encourage other people to come in if we can do a good job making sure the review period is short. People find out. I remember when the International Regional Science Review under Andy Isserman would take about 6 months for a review. It got really extraordinarily bad at one point. And that's the kind of thing we want to avoid as editors. Some people do get overcommitted, and that same thing happened with another journal I worked with. We're also to make sure that the reviewer comments don't come in conflict, and if they do, we make sure we adjudicate between them so you know what directions you're supposed to go. And that's something I've noticed even when I get comments back from editors, they don't often do that, and so I feel conflicted by the referees. And then I go back and I do, unlike what Alessandra mentioned, I do encourage you to write back to the editors to make sure you get clear a response about which direction to go. They should be able to do that if they're a good editor. Moving on, the role of the editorial board. Alan talked about some of this. Some of it, we keep people on there just because they, we know who the curmudgeons are. We know who's going to give you maybe if our rejection rate is 80%, we know some of them are 95%. We understand that, but sometimes they give good comments. We also try to make sure we have overlapping disciplines and theory and application and knowledge of data. We try to make sure these are above average field referees. That's generally true. These are people who usually are time that give really good comments. I remember when I was with the Journal of Regional Science, Tony Smith would get 7 pages of comments in review consistently. It was always very good. On the other hand, we could only count them for like 3 reviews a year as a result. There is an editors club. As you noticed here, there are a bunch of us here. We do talk at conferences. So if you're a problem author, word gets around. That's something you should be aware of. We also might even talk about, articles on occasion if something's particularly good. Do watch your references and acknowledgments. Those are keys that we use to, in your favor. Sometimes if it's acknowledgments, we might use someone on your acknowledgments as a reviewer. We also use people in your references. We usually use between 2 to 4 referees. I noticed the Papers in Regional Science uses 3 as a standard. In another journal I work with, 2 was a standard. I try to go 1 more than that, and I'll have to say right now during the COVID era, I find it really tough to pick up good referees. A lot of them are overtaxed at home with their home lives and so forth. So this is another issue right now. So I'm signing more people to review articles at first than I might ordinarily. There's Alessandra went through a lot of the reasons manuscripts are rejected. The number one I have, at least, I don't get to do this with papers, but I think Roberta does, which is just poor language quality. If the article's barely intelligible English, boom, it's out. I mean, there's no, so if you're from another country and don't speak well, make sure you have somebody who's an English language writer, or at least have somebody else read it who has a different background than you. It would really be good. Another one is lack of proper structure. People don't know how to motivate. It's sometimes I've had some accepted that read like reports. as opposed to like a paper, which is really not good. It's not at all good. It's understandable, but it's not good. And then we have a whole lot of other things, lack of up-to-date references, as Alessandra mentioned. You don't know, I've had someone doing economic impacts of golf courses. Well, if you want economic impacts of stuff, I could have published 90 articles because that's what I do for a living. No, we just can't have a can't be an ordinary run-of-the-mill input-output analysis. It has to be something new and different. It has to be, you have to put something new in there. And it helps if it's new methods, new data, new everything. The more new, the better it is, and the more we'll love it. If sometimes you have conclusions that aren't substantiated by the paper. I mean, this is one of the worst things, because we read the introduction, we read the conclusions as editors, generally speaking. That's what we do. And then there's also other things more technical and that are issues. Here's the thing is, you've gotten 14 weeks, it took a long time, maybe even 2 months, and you get this rejection notice or something else. What should you do? Maybe you didn't even get a notice. What should you do? Should you write to the editor around 14 weeks and say, what's going on? That's really the outer limit, as far as I'm concerned. If something takes 14 weeks, either the editor had trouble finding a reviewer, or the referees are just taking an inordinate amount of time. It's really, there's no excuse for that as far as I'm concerned. As an editor, I try to make sure everybody's in within 8 weeks or less. I start really nudging them hard, almost slapping them in the face if I can. And so what should you do then if your paper is rejected? Well, first of all, there's a whole thing where Krugman talks about how his papers were rejected, even though he's a Nobel Prize winner in our field. And there is in the Journal of Economic Perspectives in 1994. I'll show you the reference later. The first thing is to deal with your feelings. Don't read the details until you've calmed down. It always happens. Look, we all get rejected. I've been rejected by one in land economics, where our thing was, we said in cities, land values, green space values are higher than they are in rural areas. And so we got rejected from land economics because one referee didn't believe that. I'm not going, land economics? They don't, well, send it off to another journal. We got to immediately accept it. There's sometimes you just got to move on.
Okay, Mike, you have a couple more minutes.
Okay. Okay. Read the letter and make it look like it's a way to win a lottery ticket. And that's what you should do. Because if you got your relative revise and resubmit, it should be good. And if you get a desk rejection, be thankful, because that means it didn't fit within the scope. You go immediately to another journal within a week. But thank God you didn't wait 14 weeks to find out from one reviewer that the paper wasn't within the scope. That would be terrible. What if some points are unclear? Have a close colleague read it, and I've mentioned that before. So here's the bottom line. You got to revise and resubmit. What should you do? Well, after waiting to get 2 to 3 referee sets of comments, what should you do? Well, you might have to go 3 to 6 for a new journal. So my point would be, it's tough not to revise and resubmit. Go ahead and do it. And the number one rule of the comments is the referee is always right. That means, just follow their things. And sometimes even when the referee is clearly wrong, they're right. That means they didn't understand what you said. There's something unclear, and you should be able to figure that out from their comments. So make that clear, write to the editor and tell them why you aren't addressing the point of the way the reviewer said. Assume each referee has veto powers. And because it could be that one of them is a much stronger referee than the other two. You just don't know. And the editor might have in mind that we do favor certain reviewers sometimes. And finally, reply to every referee point, even especially if you disagree. By not hitting on them, you're just going to piss off a referee. And there's nothing worse than that. You're going to get rejected by that person for some reason. Anyway, I go through all this and just tells you to go through each a separate response. And there's the set of references on how to write papers. This is 37 pages. I've only gone through 4 or 5 slides, but I have this presentation. I can make it available to the association to post if they want the whole thing. It's just about how to go about writing a paper that's and how, the whole process of writing it. We don't teach how to write at college, at universities, especially PhD students. We assume you can, and you may never have learned. And this is kind of what this is all about. Anyway, thanks, Janet.
Thanks, Mike. That was very informative. But yeah, I think this would be a great thing to maybe have Jaewon give a link to it in one of our newsletters on the WRSA website. But this is being recorded so people can see that from the recording too. So thank you very much. Okay, the last journal is the International Journal of Urban Sciences. And the presentation will be by Young-gu Kang from University of Seoul, Korea. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Okay, so let me show in my presentation. 1 second. This is the one. Okay, let me go briefly introduce about the International Journal of Urban Sciences first. So it's published by the REVEWERS. It's one of the imprint of the Taylor and Francis Group, and it's supported by the University of Seoul and Korea Planning Association. And the IJUS is an interdisciplinary journal by nature, targeting we are especially looking for some scientific debate and sometimes analytical methods on urban and regional studies and planning. And it is indexed in SSCI and Scopus. The impact factor is around 1.8. And yeah, because it's urban sciences include almost everything from like a traditional planning, transportation, or go to like economics, environment, geography. But most of all, we are looking for two major points. One is the theoretical debates plus scientific evidence. So the argument is supported by the well-written theory or well-established the evidence. The website is a tnfonline.com and RJUS. And there is a general manager, Soon Park. So anytime you can send an email or questions, inquiry. The online submission is handled by the manuscriptcentral.com, the website, but there is a link, so you can link from the homepage of the IJUS. Nowadays, mean days, the first decision is around a month, but it's the average. So sometimes some papers takes long, and last year, due to the COVID, there is some delay, but we are catching up now. And the IJUS published 4 issues per year and plus 1 special issue almost every year nowadays. So approximately 40 plus minus papers per year. So let me just share some ideas about what papers are is listed in the IJUS. So this is the list of the most cited articles last 3 years. So as you can see, the activity-based models of travel demand, that's one, and some pollution issues, and Susan Feinstein's Justicity. This is the quite theoretical ones, and transportation modeling and spatial equity issues, and bus rapid transit, Patchy Citizen Generated Local Development Initiative. It's quite a little different wordings. And yeah, sometimes complexity in the future cities. It's quite a broad concept, and Markusen's budget concept and prox data is because we are dealing with a lot of the so-called big data. So yeah, some articles talk about the big data itself. And most read articles, yeah, the Justicity is popular, and climate projection methodology is another popular ones, and agency structures, institutions, disclosure. It's kind of the institutional aspect of the urban the issues, and the the impact of analysis of urbanization on rural livelihood. That's another interesting part, especially in the developing world. Yeah, those are, so as you can see, the topic is somewhat broad, but the core theme is how to understand better about the city, and yeah, some planning issues is related to how to make the city better, kind of the concept. And yeah, another glimpse of the ideas is okay, this winter, the first issue of the volume 25 just released. We organized a special issue around the housing affordability. So global crisis in housing affordability, look over the world affordability issue in housing area, and some affordability issues in the developing world, and some affordable housing issues in the developed world too, and Latin America areas, even African areas, and some conceptual discussions. So this is one of the some well-organized special issue in the housing affordability issue. It's the housing affordability. I realize it's the global issue, actually. It's all over the world. So this is I want to give you some ideas of what the IJ is looking for and is handled, and it's read and cited in the IJUS. So we are welcome any types of the articles and ideas and insights. But as Michael pointed, we are specifically looking for, again, I want to re-emphasize the two things. One is the theoretical, the debate, some discussions, and the solid evidence to support the argument, because sometimes the good paper is coming in, but only it has only like some analysis, and there is no context and missing. So there is something, but the author has to put into some context, and has to give the reason to the readers why should they read their papers. So that's the one part of the theoretical the aspect. And some other cases is some papers has some insights and good ideas, but it's like it's not established yet to be a part of the academic journal mainly because of the supporting detail is weak or missing. So just sometimes we hopefully I want to see the two things in paper. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. So that concludes our panel presentation. So now I'd like to open up questions to the audience. I found that one person said they had a question. Let's see, I was just pulling you up. Let's see. I think it was Ian. Let's see. Now let's see. I'm going to try to get you to be able to answer. Let's see. Open. Let me see. Are you unmuted or not? Maybe not. Hold on. I might have to call him for Caleb for help.
He posted a question in the Q&A, Janet.
Okay. Ask to unmute.
Yeah, now you can talk. And I made you.
Yeah. Ian, did you unmute him, Jaewon? Or did I unmute him?
He's ready. Yeah, he's
okay.
Talk now.
Can everyone hear me okay?
I can hear you. I can't see you. Let's see. Oh, here you are. You want to?
I don't have the option also to turn my video on, but I'd be happy to do that as well.
Let me see if we have. Promote chat. Huh. I don't have a screen sharing. Do you, Jaewon?
I think that's not quite as important anyway, right?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
It's not necessary, huh?
Okay.
You know, especially if he's a good-looking guy, he'd stun us all. You know that would.
Okay, sorry, Ian, I can't put her on your video, but I don't know if anybody else can. Okay, go ahead and ask your question.
First of all, thank you all for being here today. It's incredibly helpful. So I'll introduce myself. I'm an assistant professor of business and society at San Francisco State University in the College of Business, although my PhD is in geography and I have an MBA. So go figure. Kind of all over the place. And that's why, honestly, I was really attracted to WRSA. And I've been dying to present at the conference. And throughout my first couple years as an assistant professor, this is the first time I've had to do so. So I appreciate being here. My question is this, you know, as such an interdisciplinary scholar, I've always faced this issue of like, where do I publish and like, who am I talking with? And I finally have now a track record of 3 really strong papers that have come out of my dissertation. So from 2015 onwards, and that's the paper. This is a continuation of this ongoing research project that I'm presenting tomorrow in the session on discrimination, gender, and racial inequality. So my question is this: is it annoying, or do you think it's a good strategy for me to actually reach out to one of you, or reach out to just completely cold call an editor and say, hey, here's my abstract. Do you think it would be a good fit for the journal? Because I've asked this at other conferences and I've gotten different responses from editors in similar sorts of sessions. So again, question is, can I cold call, email you? Do you think that's appropriate for an assistant professor to do?
Well, let me start off with just my personal view. I think you're right that each editor has a different view. From my own point of view, I get like 200 or 300 emails a day. And it's very hard to distinguish one from another. So often things get lost. If somebody sends me a request, I go, you know, I'm not even going to answer this. So that's my own self. I think other people wouldn't be as nasty as me. Anybody else want to pull up?
Yeah, if I don't know if we want to go around like we're presenting or whatever.
Maybe say your journal. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. So okay, my journal is Journal of Regional Science. Ian, the reality is what Janet is actually telling you. I received a lot of emails, hundreds of emails per day, and so if it's a completely cold call, I might disregard this email just because I'm on survival mode, not because I'm trying to be nasty. And I don't think that Janet is nasty either. She's very kind, in fact. So for instance, you go to conferences, you present it, you go to an editor that is in your room and whatever. Fortunately, now we can't do face-to-face meeting anymore. But for instance, what you did right now, you just introduced your topic, and I immediately thought, oh, that's something I really like as a topic. So maybe now that I heard your name, your email will catch my eyes or whatever. But I think that if you actually send an email to somebody that doesn't know you at all, has never heard your name, in the midst of hundreds of emails, it will get lost, but not out of nastiness. It's just a reality, because we're just trying to be selective in a sense to survive.
Can I jump in again? Janet Colhase from Annals. I think that's one disadvantage of not having a face-to-face meeting. You could just walk up to one of us editors. In fact, we often say at the Annals, see our editors to discuss papers. And I have done that face-to-face. So that's a cost of not having a face-to-face meeting. So anybody else?
Janet.
Yeah, Michael.
Sorry.
Michael.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I've been a part of several journals, and it really depends on the volume of the journal, right? If it's something like papers, Roberta Campella is really the one who has to make the decision. She'll, I don't see things, I don't know how you guys distribute things at Annals and other places, but Roberta sends us, I get something at 12 manuscripts to handle at a time. Yeah. And I don't know, they're not necessarily in my area. So I could have it on migration, or I could get on productivity, and I can get it on, demographics. There's seems no rhyme or reason, unless it's an input-output one, which she tends to send to me. We don't get that many of them, I guess. But, when I was at Review of Regional Studies, then I did. And we'd only get 40 manuscripts a year.
Mhm.
And if it was, I just think it all is a function of the busyness of the editors. And also, if we knew you were an assistant editor right off the bat, assistant professor, we might be more kind than we were if Thomas, for example, sent to us. Not that Thomas isn't a nice guy, but he should know by now what's good and not, right? And so, we do get it from senior authors sometimes. So I don't want to, it's not that funny of a thing. And people will ask, is this a good fit? Well, if it's regional science, it's a good fit for all these. You have to decide whether it's regional science or not. And if it refers to a bunch of regional science journals, probably it's a good fit. And that would be my first thing to say. And then you have your pick of the litter.
I just wanted to say one thing. Actually, this paper was recently rejected from one of these 5 journals, and I won't say which one it is.
Hey, I've had one rejected from almost every one of these journals.
But unfortunately, it wasn't because the editor was unresponsive. The editor was actually great, but the reviewers, one reviewer just never reviewed it in 6 months, and the other reviewer said he liked it, but you have to do this significant overhaul, and that's why it got rejected. But anyway, it was in one of your journals. My paper as an assistant professor that I need for tenure sat there for 7 months, and then I had to email and follow up. And so all this is extremely pertinent, everything you've said today. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Can
Okay.
Janet, can I?
Yeah, anybody else have a comment? Yeah, Alan?
International Regional Science Review, and I don't think that was mine. I don't remember that name, but anyway, the cold thing, I've gotten a lot of those, and most of the time they're papers that actually have no connection to the journal. And so it really suggests that the person isn't really directing their energies in the right way, right? Because they've written a paper, they've constructed this research questions, and then they've addressed it in the context of the literature, but then they seem lost in that. And I guess I can appreciate that maybe it's been rejected or whatever. But cold calling, especially when a topic has no clear fit in a journal, seems not to be a good strategy. And I think that many of us would probably respond like Janet and Alessandra talked about, in that, we don't have time when it's clearly not a good fit. So maybe have, more confidence. I guess that's what I would suggest, is that a number of people talked about, we all get rejected. That's true. And sometimes, you send it to a place for a particular reason, and you roll the dice and see what happens, right? And life goes on.
Thanks. And the remaining 2 editors whose journals I was less familiar with, actually, and I may actually send an email to, depending on your response right now. So I know we're kind of running long on time, but for the remaining 2 editors on the call, yes or no answer, is cold calling all right?
Okay, so who would that want? Let's see. Tamaz, do you have or Neil, any comment on that?
I prefer, I had to pick up my car out of the park, so sorry, I was.
Oh.
But eventually Neil is there and could answer or the person can ask the question again. So, sorry.
Yeah. So Neil thinks.
Yeah, I can answer from my perspective. When I heard I think what you're saying, Janet, and what Alessandra was saying is, theoretically there's nothing wrong with a cold call, but the practicality is that it may get ignored, right? Mm-hmm. And Alan had a little bit of a different answer, saying, you really should have this figured out and know where your target journal might be, and don't send it to one that's completely inappropriate. Ian, by all means, send me an email, send me your paper, send me the abstract. I'm probably not going to read the whole paper. I'm going to read the abstract and quickly scan the paper, but I'd be more than happy to say, yeah, this is appropriate for the journal. It's not a statement of this is a good paper, right? It's saying that this topic and the theme, and from a quick glance, your approach seems appropriate. And by all means, submit it. At that stage, it will go through the standard refereeing process.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Okay, that makes sense. Myung-Gu Kang, do you have a
Yeah.
comment from your journal?
The cold call, this is the same thing as like a business cold call. Like when we got any kind of the cold call, most of times I just neglect because I do have many other chores to do and hundreds of emails to deal with. So there's no time to see it and take care of it. But at a very limited time, sometimes at some leisure time, there is a chance to read, but it's just less than 1%. So it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't help a lot. And most of the cases is just disregarded. So I don't say it's a bad thing, but it's usefulness is very limited.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for answering my questions. It is a subtle issue, but you know, especially with COVID, I feel I'm an in-person guy. I wish that I could go to Hawaii and go to all these amazing places and be right in the room with you all. And I think that's so important, for creating that stickiness where you get your name out there and you show up to the conference and you do it and you meet the editors. And so, for what it's worth, I appreciate you all being here in the wake of the global pandemic. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you for your interest. Let's see, anybody else? Let's see, looks like the questions I have are from Ian. I think that might be it. I don't see anything.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
Alice?
Yes,
sorry. No, I just wanted to say that, Ian, you did the right thing because, see, I think this is an opportunity. And, the fact that you were here and you were the only one asking question, I think actually you are kind of grabbing an opportunity, which is very important and other people haven't probably realized it was so important. So to say that, even if we don't get to see each other in face to face, this was an opportunity and it would have been good even if it wasn't face to face.
No, I appreciate that so much. You maybe see an email from me.
I know, I just checked. It wasn't my journal because your name is not in the system.
No, it wasn't an email, but in all honesty, I don't mean to even I'm not upset with the journal. I think it's just the whole process, and like was also said during COVID, it's just like no one is reviewing, and it sucks for assistant professors. It's just one more layer of challenges. But I appreciate your response. Thank you.
I'm not so sure they are not reviewing. I think that they get more overwhelmed because if the submissions go up, like it seems it happened to all our journals, then they might be asked more. So I think I don't want to blame just the reviewers.
Yeah.
I do know as an editor at Annals, there's more people who don't even respond to the invitation. They just get uninvited after a certain amount of time. So that adds time to the review process. That has increased during COVID. And people who just turn us down have increased. So definitely Annals is having trouble.
Would it be possible to potentially resubmit this article to the journal that it was rejected to, given that the reason given was that one reviewer just never got around to responding in 7 months?
I think that's going to be up to each journal. Yeah, Mike?
As a hypothetical question?
I was just going to say, you should ask the editor, period. Right. I mean, some people are willing and other people are just going to say, no, we have too many journals, too many articles coming through, go elsewhere. And to be honest, as I kind of said, the difference amongst these in impact factor are minuscule. And so, relatively speaking, and I think you're better off moving onward and getting other reviewers. I did that with my first 3 or 4 publications. I mean, I went to Southern Economic Journal. They gave me one reviewer who said, nothing's new here. And they pointed out an article that I had already cited and even had the equation of. And so the person didn't read it. It was clear they didn't read, but that could have been on my fault because I wasn't clear. And that's part of the issue I mentioned before.
And again, and that's the nature of academia, is that we're all trained to, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. We're all trained to socially and to navigate this world and to be critical thinkers. And I think it's, in many ways, it's easier to just reject a paper based on some, how many times have you seen comments from reviewers and you're like, wow, that's so out of left field. Does this reviewer even know what the heck I'm my field at all? And it's clear that they don't,
And there's another thing that was a signal for that journal. They could only
Yeah.
get one referee. And that could be a problem that they might have asked 6 of them and they could only get one. And if that's true, it was the wrong journal for you. And another editor might be able to collect a better set of reviewers. On the other hand, they may also get the same one you just got rejected by. So watch yourself.
Right.
But also, Ian, your references, did they mention a lot of regional science journals?
Oh yeah, all day long. I mean, I've actually published like in the Professional Geographer, in the California Geographer, recently in a journal called Business and Society Review, which had its own challenges going over to a business ethics journal. But no, my PhD is in geography and urban studies, and I do big data, spatial analyst, GIS, quantitative regression analysis, stuff like that. And so I'm purely citing regional, scholars all day long, and that's why I honestly, if it were up to me, I would only go to this conference, but I'm required to go to other conferences to show my tenure committee that I'm also like making an effort to be in their world too, which is management. I'm in a management department, go figure. But anyway, I feel like I'm amongst good people here already, and I don't want to take up all your time. But so again, thank you very much for answering my questions.
Janet, we have one chat from Sumi Lee, and she said it's not a question, but reviewers respond to on time if they get paid. I don't know. It's like skin in the game thing.
You're silent.
I know, Mike.
Janet is. Janet, you're silent.
Muted. You're silent.
Oh, I have to unmute myself. Sorry. Jaywan, I sort of missed part of what you were saying. You're saying that somebody asked a question about, would it be better if reviewers were paid? Is that what you were asking?
In the chat area.
The chatting.
Okay.
If the reviewer would respond on time, if they get paid.
Thomas sends me a check every month, so.
And you collect them and get one beer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's ever been a consideration of that, but I do know that I think like JPE pays the reviewers, right? There's several journals that do pay the reviewers, but Annals certainly doesn't.
Mostly economics journals do, but I don't think there's one regional science. And the only thing that it depends on how much they pay you. Like I was offered to review a dissertation for $500. Well, do I do it on time? At this stage in my career, $500 is something, but not enough to get me to read 500 pages within 1 month. And so it all depends on what what they're offering, and I'm no faster with a paid journal than I am a non one. I can't also do reviews in 10 days like Nature Climate Change wants me to do. And so I reject those. And the MDI journals too, the same thing. They want really quick reviews. And I'm like, come on, guys, give me a break.
That's why I think some of the journals. Go ahead.
No, I think there is an obvious problem with that. To actually pay reviewers, you'll need to ask the people that are submitting an article to pay submission fees. And some of the, let's say, mainstream economics journals do, but I don't think we are going that direction. In fact, if you want my idea, and we discussed among the editors of Journal of Regional Science whether we wanted to introduce a submission fee, because we were receiving so many submissions, and we thought, in principle we could, but we decided not to. It's not something we wanna do, make this a market. At the end of the day, Michael is right. If you're feeling like you want to review, you do it, whether or not they give you $50 or whatever it is. That doesn't make a difference. And so I don't know. Maybe it will make a difference for the younger, the less senior people, reviewer, but
it'll be biased against them too. That's the trouble.
Yeah.
It's a bias because they're the ones who don't have the money to do the submission fees. I mean, it's
yeah, I mean,
vicious circle.
the submission fees then will follow. I don't think it would be a good idea.
But what's more important now is, are you an open journal? And that was something that becomes more important for younger people, because if they can't get access right real quickly, they don't cite the paper. And so that's another thing that journals are starting to consider a little bit more, at least your ability to buy into becoming an open journal, that article being open. And I'm hearing more about that happening among publishers and asking whether you want to become an open journal and start charging authors as they come in once they're accepted $1,000 or $2,000, because universities are starting to give them money for that.
Yeah, can I chime in? I think it seems like many European universities actually buy open source, I don't know if the word is, provisions for their people submitting to journals, like at Annals. Certain universities, their articles are open source, other ones aren't. And it's, I think, a pretty big fee. But you're right, that is moving. I'm seeing more universities buying into this open source fee for the journals. But that's something sort of above the level of a professor submitting. It's the university, right?
My school has actually asked us if we have want to apply for those funds right now. So our public policy schools. So it's not medical schools which get it. Our medical and science schools all have that already. But it's the social sciences less so. But I'm just saying it's starting to, there's enough swells. They're starting to get us buy in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably true. Okay, let's see. Anybody else see any chat? I don't see anything else in the chat.
Janet, this is Joan. Can I add just, some thoughts about this open source journal?
Yes.
And we've seen some of those journals, like, for example, MDPI journals, like, sustainability, have been there for a long time now. And people are talking about the impact factor of the sustainability. But at the same time, they're talking about the different stories of the quality of the papers in that journal. So, but at the same time, as Alexandra pointed out, the impact factor matters for your tenure and promotion, and to prove some sort of a measure, quantifiable measure, to prove the quality of the journal. And as Mike just mentioned, more and more the university is promoting the support, the financial support for their members to publish in the open source journal. So my question to all of you, the editors, does any of the regional science journals seriously thinking of making some sort of hybrid model, or at least some open source journal in next 5-10 years? I don't know, it's too far, but I just want to hear from where we're heading to.
Well,
Thomas, go ahead.
Well, sorry, I didn't answer the last questions. Well, I think this is an interesting subject that is going to change, and we should move on with quality and with the target for each one of the journals, and with treating well the reviewers and the authors and the editors, and knowing each other, although being blind. It is important to create this community. One of the great assets of papers in regional science and regional science policy and practice is that we have 5,000 or 450,000 4,500 members. And this is one asset that eventually could continue, because the way we see, for instance, sustainability, that they rush in publishing papers and the quality eventually is not so good, it depends a lot. I think to go in that and pay a lot, that's a very good business. That we can do now with online platforms in Regional Science Association International. So the possibility of having alternatives to these open source journals, it is possible with much cheaper way, and eventually can do it. We have, I think, nevertheless, that the experience of region in IRSA is not the best, because there is no professionalism. So I think that's between being in the publishing business is very professional. and Wiley and Elsevier and so on are very good on that. And there is relatively competition between them. So I think that this will, I bet that this will be the future, because marketing is important, because this evolution in software is important. On the other hand, having Regional Science Association International as an enlarged Regional Science Association, in fact, we can propose open access to all members and to more journals. And this, I think it's, well, I told it, it's an asset that we could use. I'm not, I don't like this idea of paying to publish, because if you have money, you publish, and the interest of the journal is to receive that money. So there is no, you always have someone to do the reviewing, always have someone to do the editing. So I think it is a game that does not lead to a very good outcome. But I think the way we are somehow with professional publishers, we can try having ourselves our own open source journal, or having an agreement with other source. But that's that's just a question of money, and of course there is always a lot of people in these more poor countries that are wise enough to publish and to do the work that the homework that is needed for this publishing business. So I think.
Okay, thank you, Tomas. I see we have a question in the chat, which I just lost it. Yifei Sun, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for everyone. I have a question. It's something related to personal experience, because during the writing, submission, and publication, in a couple of cases, I feel some editors do have different styles in terms of how to handle then manuscript. One of the issues I found in cases where some editor will choose a hands-free approach towards the reviewers' comments in terms of manuscript. By that I mean, whenever the reviewers' comments are in, they will make the decision based on the reviewers' the comments without personally reading the manuscript. I can see that. So particularly this is hurtful. This kind of approach is hurtful when the reviewers' comments are biased. I mean, everybody has some bias, to be honest, but at a certain time, those biases are pretty clear. But without the editor, him or herself reading the manuscript, simply accept whatever the reviewers' comments and then make a decision on that. That becomes something I can see for some journals. I'm wondering what's your position on this in terms as an editor. I know you guys are working very hard. Should the editor read the manuscript carefully and then come up with their own decision, a third personal review on the manuscript before reading the external reviewers' comments and then make a decision? So what's your position on this? How to
say that's a pretty tough question. Anybody want to take that one?
It's not something normally you would expect someone from audit to ask this kind of weird question. Be honest with you.
That's actually a normal question. It's not a weird one, and I can take that on quickly, which is that first of all, it all depends on the subject matter. I mean, I've gotten unsolicited reviews. Believe it or not, somebody knew they were submitting there and then submitted a rejection notice, even though we didn't even ask them for a review. So there's things as rough as that, and then you start suspecting something. But it's hard for us to know in advance if there is some squabble between authors unless the author responds to it that way. And that's where I disagreed with Alessandra. I do like letters from my authors if they find that problem. Otherwise, I can't be aware of that there's a battle going on.
That's right.
In the field. And so I do read those, and I do like those personally. On the other hand, some people take offense awfully easy. And there was one I was doing for another, not a regional science journal, where people were measuring value chains, and somebody went, saying, well, they're using my measure and blah, 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 blah. Well, it happened to be somebody who had part of it in their dissertation, but somebody else had developed it either before or during the same conference that the person was at, and they got all upset about it. And I'm just saying, some of this stuff is, and everybody else in the field said, well, that person may have thought they developed on their own, but it actually was developed by somebody else over here before. We can't know all that background. And so at a certain point, I encouraged the person to submit, but then they got slammed down by the set of referees that were not the ones they were complaining took their idea. And so it all, some people get a little bit too hot under the collar about certain things. So be aware that that can happen, and it does happen, but also can happen against the author. It plays both ways, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I do welcome comments, and I think all editors should.
Can I just say this? Because well, Michael mentioned this during his presentation as well. I just wanted to answer before, then I didn't. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to come back to the point. I didn't say that I don't want comment from the authors. I said not to write and say that they are incompetent, which goes back to your principle number one. So it's basically, I think we are in
number
agreement.
In number two. Yeah.
So I think that we are in agreement in the sense that I don't like, I guess everybody has her or his own style. I don't like fights over people. So there are ways of actually telling me, look, I think that the referee number one is incorrect, because without actually saying, I think the referee number one is incompetent, I did it before or whatever. If you come across like this, I think that you lose a little bit of credibility. So personally, if you want to write back to me, do it with a certain style, because it's more likely that I will actually listen to your reply. So going back to the question of Yifei, in Journal of Regional Science, we use 3 referees. And to pick the referees, of course, I have to read the paper, because I have to actually at least quickly, but I have to read it through to decide whether it's a text rejection or whether actually send it to the referees. Now, when it comes back, if I get 3 rejections, I read through the paper, but actually with 3 rejections, it's very unlikely that I'm gonna overturn the decision. If on the opposite, I get only 2 referees saying one it's a rejection and the other one is a major revision, I don't necessarily immediately send a rejection letter like, in some journals they do, but I actually look at the paper myself. And sometimes I did overturn the decision, saying, look, one of the 2 referees, submitted a rejection, but I think there is some potential. Although, of course, normally, if you have 1 major and 1 rejection, that means that there is quite a bit of work that needs to be done on the paper. There are cases where we get an acceptance in the first round is very unlikely, but say a minor revision and a rejection, these are the cases that I look through more carefully, because then kind of, there's a red light going on and saying, okay, one of the 2 might not be right. And so in that case, I act as a tiebreaker, and I actually do have to read the paper more carefully. So some cases are more difficult than others. And again, because you have so many articles to handle and the time is what it is, if you have 3 rejection, I admit it, that paper goes through quite quickly, because 3 out of 3 all making mistakes, it's unlikely, and plus it will actually be very, very difficult to overturn 3 referees.
It won't happen,
And a lot of work for you. And that's the other side of it.
Editors have lots of work. It means that's lots of work. How many submissions they have every year, and then being editors, picking up the editorship, the position is very tough. If you really every submission carefully, that becomes something really demanding, in my judgment.
And there also one person's rejection is another person's major revision sometimes. And if they all reject, but they say there's a lot of enthusiasm for the paper, I might be more inclined to make it a major revision. It all depends on also if everybody says, boy, this paper was really hard to read and I'm not even sure it makes that much of a contribution.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty clear I'm going to reject it. But if they, if it's, you know, especially if it's by a senior person, again, these persons should know better. If it's a younger person, I'm always more biased, be honest. People always think we're biased towards older authors. I'm the opposite. And so, you know, I'm more willing to encourage a younger person to try a little bit harder, and I give them more instruction on how to revamp the paper. Again, if it's a senior person, I'm just going to send them the comments and say, hey, look, this is, I lean towards this referee, these other two not, and you know, I let you know who the stronger referees are in my mind about this article, because again, I may have pulled, you know, somebody in on something that is a general reader. Sometimes I do that, and you know, it all depends. Anyway.
Yeah, it really depends. It really depends. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think our time is up. I think this has been a very informative session. I wish we had more people asking questions, but we got some really good discussion going amongst all our editors. So maybe we'll do this again. What?
I have a quick question for the other people here. I'm for the editors, and since we're kind of over, I'm in a situation where we have talk about trends. They're going towards taking off the plastic and making so there's no laminated covers anymore, so they can print the addresses on the back, make it more environmentally sound.
Good.
So my journal had its table of contents on the back cover, much like Journal of Regional Science does.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do? I kind of like the table of contents on the journal. Because when I'm sorting through, I know it's a paper on housing, and maybe Janet Holhays did it, but it was back in 2006, plus or minus 3 years. So I start going through my paper copy to look at what's on the cover. And you know, going through what's online would take me 5 times longer, just because switching between issues is tough. And so I'm just wondering, how do you guys? What do you wouldn't put? Would you put the table of contents on the cover? I know WRSA or
pretty sure
the Annals already has it, right?
Yeah.
But what do you have on the back cover?
If the front cover doesn't fit at all, we usually put on the back cover too. It often goes from the front to the back.
Yeah. And see where we're going to have the limits on that. So, and they don't want to go beyond a certain print because then it smears and blah blah blah. You know, so I'm just wondering. You know, we're on another journal, not this one, not because I think Papers also has the table contents on the front cover. But you know, this is an issue that's going to become becoming more environmentally sound when we send out paper copy. The question is, as Thomas mentioned, maybe we're going to go out of paper copy altogether, not too long future.
Right.
Which I regret.
I'm against paper copies. I have to admit, I'm against paper copy, and I did say that to Roberta as well when I was.
But I'm an old fart. I need the paper copy.
Yeah, I know, but what about the environment, Michael?
I know. I'm
no
environmentally.
Paper copies.
Well, then I print it out here at home on my paper. That's the trouble, Alessandra.
Well, with us laughing at the end, perhaps we should call it a quits, and we can talk more at coffee breaks tomorrow. Anyway, thank you all so much for participating. I really appreciate it. It was really lively and interesting. So I'm going to call it a quits, and we're going to turn off now. Thank you.